Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, October 15th, 2024, and today we are talking fencing out deer and other critters, plus what we are or could be planting this late in the season. So let's do it. First, I really loved yesterday's episode of the Composter podcast, which you can find on the No-Till Growers Podcast Network. This one was with Andrew Brosseau, operations manager there at Black Earth Compost. He and the host of that show, Jane Murner, whom I will have on here at some point to guest host Growers Daily because she's amazing. They discuss PFAS or PFAS, or what are called forever chemicals. And I think it's one of the better explanations I've heard on how these forever chemicals work. Frankly, there is an enormous amount of confusion out there and a little bit of fear mongering, thanks in large part to really unfortunate headlines about where PFAS comes from and where to be concerned about it. To be sure, regulations over the last 2 decades or so have decreased the quantities and potency of these chemicals in the environment, and hopefully will continue to do so. So that's the first thing. It ain't as big of an issue as it once was, but that doesn't mean it's nothing, because it is worth noting why these forever chemicals are such a problem. According to the EPA, various forever chemicals have been linked to developmental effects in children, including low birth weight, accelerated puberty, bone variations, or behavioral changes. They have increased risk of some cancers, including prostate, kidney, and testicular cancer, among several other health issues. There have also been concerns, I believe, with high blood pressure in pregnant women. These forever chemicals are also freaking everywhere. They're in rain, they're in waterways, it's in your blood, yours, mine, everyone's. In our food, they are everywhere. And the reason is because these chemicals were built to avoid degradation. They are water resistant and they thus don't break down very quickly or easily because decomposition takes moisture. The biggest sources of these PFAS or PFAS, however, are not food scraps and carbonaceous waste materials or even water necessarily, all the things that are usually in compost, but they're in things like the recycled paper stream, effectively waste from the recycled paper industry, and some sewer sludge, which is a difficult phrase to say, sewer sludge, which is a certified organic farm. We can't use anything that comes from sewer sludge or sewer sludge itself anyway. In other words, though, every compost is going to contain some amount of PFAS because, again, these chemicals are absolutely everywhere. Composts that don't use those two specific feedstocks are inherently going to have lower concentrations in general. Anyway, that is just a light summary of a very good episode to listen to for the professional composter perspective on PFAS and how composters are working to avoid these chemicals. As a small-scale composter at your house or on your own farm, you are unlikely to run into large amounts of PFAS in your compost inputs unless your buddy owns a paper mill or something, or you have a line on some really good local sewer sludge. If you're buying compost, you can ask the composter how they reduce the risk of PFAS contamination in their feedstocks, but it is worth listening to that episode to get a better understanding of how these things work. You can find that at our podcast channel called the No-Till Growers Network or on YouTube, or just look up the Composter podcast wherever else you listen to podcasts. Obviously, I can cover PFAS more in future episodes if you all are interested in learning, but I thought since they did such a nice job, I'll point you towards that for now and also say you don't have to stop buying compost because you're concerned about PFAS contamination. Just talk to the composter. From what I can tell, most of them are all over this issue because there was an event in Maine where a lot of PFAS was found on a farm because of spreading compost. So anyway, I hope that clears that up a little bit, but check out that episode. Because I can't think of a good way to segue out of that topic that makes any sense, I'll just be bold and ask, do you all make lists? I love lists, stemming from my time in cooking in kitchens, I guess. I got used to making lists and sticking to them. The days where I don't make a list for whatever reason are the days I bounce from one project to another aimlessly. No, in fact, there is actually a word for that, listless. I do it listlessly. I start on random projects or work on things that don't need to be done in that moment because I don't have a list to evaluate what is a priority. The thing is, although I do love lists, sometimes I get out of the habit of making them. Part of the reason for that is how much I hate keeping lists on my phone. I like paper lists. I like the physical act of writing what needs to be done down and then marking each task out as I accomplish it. There's like something very satisfying about that. But also when it's on my phone and I open my phone, I have messages and email notifications and all the things waiting there to distract me. Now, part of this is simply a management thing on my end. I don't get any social media notifications on my phone, and I could end all notifications and leave my phone somewhere else or whatever, then just switch back to a paper notebook. But my phone is how I listen to podcasts and communicate from the field with my wife and also with my business partners. I co-run 2 businesses, so I can't exactly be away from my phone for 8 hours during the workday very easily. So my question for you is, what do you all do to manage your lists and stay on task? Do you use a paper list? Do you use your phone? Do you use Google Docs? What's your go-to method? To be clear, I don't need ideas for me. I have my ideas. I want to hear what you all actually do that works for you. Let me know wherever you let me know things, comment sections, Instagram, wherever, because I'd be curious to know. Maybe I'll share some of the better ones on this podcast. Otherwise, next, we will get to a listener question from our Patreon members at patreon.com/no-till-growers, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. If you, the listener, want to support our work, you can do so at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. You can join for as low as $2 a month. What is that, like half a gallon of gas per month? Hopefully this show brings you half a gallon of gas worth of utility every month. And so if you get some value out of this, that would be great to kick in a few bucks at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Anyway, today's question comes from Patreon member Charles Best, who writes, I'm hoping you'll do an episode on fencing, covering questions like, for keeping out deer, what are the pros and cons of different options for posts and fence material? And for raccoons, rabbits, woodchucks, etc. Is it the case that there's really no physical barrier that can fend off squirrels, for example, if you were trying to grow hazelnuts? Okay, so cool. Great questions, Charles. I appreciate that. And I get lots of questions about deer fencing because deer are obnoxious giant rodents that just won't give up. Let's start with that first one about what are the pros and cons of different fencing options for deer. So according to the studies, the best options for 100% protection is an 8-foot tall woven wire fence, or like 2.5 meters. Of course, that's expensive, and depending on how big your garden is, and labor intensive, and both construction and maintenance will take a lot of work. If a tree or large branch falls on it, and you may not know about it right away, and then of course you have to fix that. Depending on the size and location of that fence, if it's in the woods, you just genuinely may not know it happened for a while. Now, the more affordable option is to offset fencing, where you place one 4-foot fence on the inside, whether woven wire or whatever, and one electrified wire strand 4 feet away on the outside. Basically, it's like a double fence, where one of the fences is a simple electrified wire, or 2, preferably something visible though. This effectively takes advantage of deer's poor depth perception, and it kind of convinces them not to try and jump over something they can't tell how wide it is. And this is a thing. I actually wanted to ensure that. I went and read about cervids and their depth perception, and it's not very good. It's true. Again, it was one of those things I was like, I hear this all the time. Is it true? And it seems to be true. Deer do have really poor depth perception. Another version of that same fence is one that I found from Texas A&M, and what this is a 4-wire system. So it's basically 3 front fence lines. The first one in the front has 1 wire. The line in the middle has 2 wires. And then the line on the very inside has another single wire. I'm not going to do all the details here because it would be extremely boring. But I'm posting some pictures on YouTube. And then I will also post the link in the show notes so you can check that out. And you can use one of the energizers from like a place like Premier One that runs on solar to charge it. We use those for fencing in our sheep for years, and they work great. However, that will not help with your raccoon, rabbit, or woodchuck element. The woven wire fencing will be better for that, especially with chicken wire at the bottom. Of course, keeping that setup clean is a nightmare. Portable electric fencing is usually what we use to protect our sweet corn through the season from raccoons, but we already owned that from when, like I said, we managed sheep, so we didn't have to buy that expensive fencing for something as unprofitable as sweet corn, which we mainly don't grow for other people. We grow it for ourselves because it's freaking sweet corn. It's amazing. Plus, you can just kind of shuck it and put it in your freezer and then just put it in everything, because do I need to repeat that it's amazing? It's amazing. It's sweet corn. Plus, with the electric netting, you only have to move it once around the corn to mow it, and then you put that back down, and that's like the whole crop's life. If you had it around your whole garden for a whole season, you would have to mow quite a few times, which would mean picking it up quite a few times, or otherwise it would get swallowed by grass, and it's obnoxious to get those electric wires out of grass. I mean, if you've ever pulled a fence out of grass, it's the same thing, but with like breakable plastic. That said, for a small garden, a portable net that can be taken down and mowed around, assuming you are willing to commit to that, plus one strand around the outside could be enough to deter all of the above, so long as it stays clean and electrified. Another perhaps off the beaten path idea is one that I saw at Blake Cothran's place at Peaceful Heritage Farm, not far from here. We did a video with Blake, and I will post that link in the show notes as well. But it's a system where he basically takes cattle panels and sets them at an angle. So instead of being straight up and down like a normal fence, imagine it sort of looks like a ramp. His thesis here is that this sort of ramp idea, where it's kind of long instead of straight up and down, accomplishes the same thing as the double fence offset, where it sort of plays on deer's poor depth perception. Then he can just lift up the whole fence pretty easily and mow or weed whack underneath. It's an interesting idea for sure. I think that would be cool to study that with other ones. As for posts, with the electrified wire, the posts are a white fiberglass or plastic, which is visible and will not decompose. For natural post options, a rot-resistant wood is really the only way to go. Locust, cedar, etc. You can treat those with oils like linseed oil or char them with a blowtorch, but I have no idea how much longer that will extend the life of those posts. I couldn't find any research on those treatments specifically, so I honestly can't say more. I've seen good cured cedar posts last upwards of 10 years, though, so that's positive. A lot of that will depend on how much moisture your soil gets. Like if you're out west and you don't get a lot of moisture, it's not going to break down that quickly. If you're here in the east and you get a lot of moisture, you probably will, those posts won't last as long. Obviously, pressure treated wood is going to last the longest, but the chemicals used in pressure treating are quite harsh, and you will not want to plant anywhere near them. In organic certification, you can't anyway. You can't use pressure treated wood anywhere it comes in contact with crops or garden soil at all. So that would be like on your baseboards of your tunnels, the ones that touch the ground. You can't use pressure treated wood there. You cannot use it in nurseries where the plants will come in contact with it, though you can technically use it in the nursery where the plants and soil will not touch the wood. It can't be used for raised beds or boxes. Obviously, that will, be used to grow food inside of. You can't build a raised bed with pressure treated wood, fill that with soil, and then grow plants. In other words, for fence posts, there must be a large buffer between the treated wood and the garden, the sufficiency of which is kind of determined by the inspector, but the post cannot be, quote, in contact with soil or crops in the organic production area. I kind of feel like an inspector told me 15 feet once, but I don't want to vouch for that, but I think if you show that there's a buffer between your garden and your fence post, you're probably going to be on the safe side. Maybe best to just ask the inspector if it's enough before you install the fencing, just so you don't get in trouble. Now, to your second question about squirrels and protecting your hazelnuts. Well, I'm sorry ahead of time for the following answer. If you have watched the Squirrel-Proof Bird Feeder videos by Mark Rober, you have probably learned that, squirrels are up for just about any challenge. Your best bet with them is to incorporate more habitat for squirrel predators and possibly some sort of trap crop like a bird feeder with seeds that are less work for them than the hazelnuts will be. I have seen folks recommend growing strong-smelling crops like mint and marigolds and such, and I don't think there is any harm in doing that to deter squirrels and also other large predators. Plus, mint is great for pollinators and mixed in with watermelon juice for mocktails or mint juleps in the spring. Yep. Also, some people mention, suggest motion-activated options like sprinklers and maybe some of those annoying talking fishes that sing when you walk by. That could work. I think using a variety of tactics will, if nothing else, reduce the squirrel shrinkage. Back to deer for a second. I should say that we used to have a garden with absolutely no fence and just a big Great Pyrenees named Wendell. And we never had any deer issues in that 1 acre plot, which often had things like sweet potatoes and lettuces that deer love. We would have to occasionally sacrifice a slice of a garden bed that he chose to sleep on, but that was a pretty small price to pay. And for the most part, he stayed out of the garden while also deterring the deer. He passed in 2020 before we moved. Rip Wendell Bear, greatest dog ever. And we would have gotten another Pyrenees because they are big and awesome, but he was also very loud and barked all night. So we couldn't have a dog like that at our new property, lest we want to make our neighbors hate us, which you don't want. That's just a pro tip. Anyway, I hope that mostly answers your questions. And I'm sure there will be input from others in the comments section on deer fencing, posts, etc. Up next, what we can or would plant in our region in mid-October, which is right now. Be right back. Hey, y'all, Farmer Jesse here. I just wanted to let you know that we have posted a bunch of discount codes over at our Patreon page at patreon.com/no-till-growers for our patrons over there. So if you love and appreciate our work and you could use a little break on the cost of seeds this year or on your irrigation supplies or boots or whatever, we have several discount codes available over at our Patreon page. Like I said, patreon.com/no-till-growers. So, just to be clear, that means for as little as $2 a month, you can save hundreds of dollars on your farming stuff this year. That's real. That page is so valuable to our work, and at a certain level, we'll even shout you out at the end of this show. Because you rock. That's it. Thanks, y'all. Enjoy the show. All right, so our region gets pretty cold in the winter, so there's not a lot of outdoor growing that can be reliably done here in Kentucky. That isn't just cover crops. That said, there are still a few crops worth exploring that can be grown well into the winter in the field, but especially in the high tunnels. For the most part, I like to have all my winter stuff in the high tunnels by October 15th at latest, and in the field by October 1st at latest, because the amount of growth you get after that point is basically not growth. It's basically nothing. Sunlight is diving right now at something like 15 to 20 minutes of daylight per week in October. So like Sunday this week will be 15 minutes longer than it will be 15 to 20 minutes longer than it will be next week. Anyway, sunlight is diving, and with that goes air temperature. So our ability to grow anything comes to a veritable standstill until the spring. That's why I always say it's not winter growing as much as it is fall growing, followed by winter keeping it alive. Basically, you get it to size and then protect it from, whatever crop it is all winter. Anyway, in terms of crops for eating, we will still sow some spinach in the field this time of year. Hardier Savoy spinach like Tundra will produce okay through a mild winter, but really come back to life in February and March for a few nice harvests, while also being the absolute sweetest spinach you've ever had. I also really like sowing a bed of carrots in October of Mokum or some other short day carrot for January/February harvests. They often don't have the same pigmentation of summer sown carrots. In other words, the carrots themselves are a little bit paler than those harvested in the fall after a frost, but the flavor is outrageous. We are still transplanting lettuces as well, giving the lettuces slightly more space for air movement. Arugula is another one we will put in the ground in October and again in late December. Kale is not the worst bet either, though I like to have my winter kale transplanted by October 1st. Radishes and turnips I have not had as much luck with in the winter because although they will grow, when those hard freezes come, they often damage the radish or turnip itself beyond marketability, basically making them translucent and not super tasty. We will transplant some leeks as well, like right now that we started back in June. The taller the leek, the bigger the blanch you can get on it. We will transplant some of those right now in both the tunnel and the field. I'm really trying to breed a leek seed that does well in the field here over winter, but this year will be my first generation of it, so we'll see. But could be cool to have more crops growing in the field over the winter that you can actually harvest. So that's the hope with these leeks. Also, I can't grow leeks in the summer because they are just too darn slow. It takes up too much space for too long. But if they will grow over the winter while I'm being the slow one, great. You can grow salad greens like mosh as well. But unless you have chefs who will pay $30 a pound for it, I can't imagine it would be worth it. You only get one cutting on mosh, and it's very small and lightweight. Very tasty, but still small. Some of those other winter greens like Claytonia and Minutina need a little bit more protection than mosh, but are super tasty and winter hardy and give you much bigger yields. They also can be sown in the tunnel as well around now. I love the flavor of both of those crops a great deal, but again, they are niche items that may not sell as easily as something like lettuce. Cilantro is somewhat ironically, given what it is typically eaten with, but cilantro is a good winter one for the field and tunnel. Same with pea shoots, which can be grown pretty quickly and give you a second cutting. Yeah, I don't know. What are you all growing in the winter? Or do you sow anything in October for eating purposes? Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, but I'd love to hear what you all are still planting in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, they are in full on spring mode, I imagine at this point, busting their butts to have early tomatoes and beans by Christmas, which frankly sounds awesome. Maybe one of these days we can all go enjoy the holidays in Australia where we can carol in shorts while snacking on tomatoes. If you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share. Sharing really helps grow this show, and it also lets us know if you like it, which is also helpful. If you are listening to me in the field somewhere, and I guess I don't know, yell about it. Also, the Living Soil Handbook is available in French. I feel like I don't say this enough. I will link that in the show notes. And soon the Living Soil Handbook will also be available in German and Italian, which is wild. Most farm books never sell more than 1,000 copies, let alone get translated. So you all rock for making it possible for this book to get that honor. You're incredible. Also, speaking of books, Dan Brisebois has a new book coming out called The Seed Farmer, same as his podcast, The Seed Farmer Podcast. You can pre-order that at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. You can also join us at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers as well, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or if you just join us at all in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, here we go, Anna Martha Brown. Nice. Carol Denzinger. I don't know, maybe a 6 out of 10 on that one. Maybe I got it right. Scott Petamonte. You probably just say all 4 of those, I think, probably, right, Scott? Stephen M. Sachs. Jakers Acres. Is that the name of your farm? That is so good. Hannah and I'm going to have to tell this story tomorrow. Hannah and I, when we named our farm, she originally suggested geniusly that we name it Farmy Farm Organical Farm. And I sometimes regret not just going with that. That's a brilliant name. Thanks to everyone who supports us in whatever way that you can. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. We'll talk about farm names.